I'm here with Dr. Ross Greene, a child psychologist, a best-selling author, and the thing that I know him most for is his work in Lives in the Balance and working with students, families, teachers on collaborative and proactive solutions. Ross, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for inviting me to do this.
We talked a little bit about my position in schools, and I'm I don't have to hold back. People understand that my position about school systems and how that they're imposed on schools, and I feel like I'm in the swirl of all of that. And at the same time, I think that public schools are where children go, and I want to be a part. It's where my daughter goes, actually, to my school, and I enjoy being part of generating solutions for people who have problems that are waiting to be solved. My big ask for you throughout the conversation might be, okay, let's say tier one, I bet an answer would be if we want to get really good at collaborative and proactive solutions, it would be great if we could attend a certification training and really learn it. Um, okay, next best thing might be, can we use the essence of collaborative and proactive solutions, that is, solving problems collaboratively throughout our school in a way that becomes part of the system, that it's kind of like part of the water and how we treat kids. And how have you experienced getting people on board from not understanding or not believing in this practice or believing it takes too much time to where people can begin to use some of these resources and tools and conversations with success?
Uh, well, um, we certify people because we care about making sure that people who represent that they are qualified to train in the model and practice the model know what they're doing.
Mm,
The most of the world will not get certified in the CPS model. Most of the world will attend a training of some kind or read a book about collaborative and proactive solutions. Many schools, many more than I even know, have implemented the model just by reading a book. So while the training is there if people need it, some people don't need it. And the part that people need the training on the most, I would say, is how to use the assessment instrument of the model called the Assessment of Skills and Unsolved Problems, or ASAP, but especially on how to solve problems collaboratively and proactively with kids, because that's a bit of a learned art.
mm.
Does everybody in the building need to be incredible at it? No. Do we need some people in the building to be pretty good at it so they can help people who are struggling with it? Yeah. But boy, we put a lot of thought and effort into making the model as accessible as possible. Quite frankly, I think that if people adopt the ideas alone, they never get trained in the practices. And I'm not recommending this, but if that's the only thing that happened, I think we would be pushing things forward in a major way.
If people adopted the ideas alone, they would believe that it's worthwhile to get kids involved in conversations about unsolved problems.
No
So
doubt.
that's a good starting point.
No doubt about it. And they would also believe that the reason you want to get kids involved is because they know better than we do
Mm.
what's making it hard for them to meet certain expectations. Kids would have a hard time telling us this. We need to be the ones to figure out. A kid wouldn't tell you, could y'all just focus on the expectations I'm having difficulty meeting
Right.
that that are causing my concerning behaviors rather than being so obsessed with modifying my concerning behaviors? I don't think you wouldn't hear that from a kid. Us adults got to be on top of that one.
But kids seem to be just fine with us categorizing unsolved problems into the categories that you've put them into. So if we're working on one, two, three uh, problems and we have collaboration amongst us and a conversation and input from the kid about what is making things difficult or what is too demanding, and we have something in place that allows us both to get needs met. I haven't seen a kid recoil from that process.
Never.
Mhm.
I mean, you do have some kids who are skeptical of the process, but that's
Yeah.
mostly based on history,
Mhm.
and not history with solving problems collaboratively, history with how adults have treated them, and what's going to happen if you should talk to an adult. A lot of them are concerned that you're going to lower the boom. A lot of them have lost faith that adults are even listening. A lot of them have become quite convinced that their concerns are going to be dismissed or disregarded. So those who aren't particularly responsive to us engaging them in the process of solving their lives typically have a good reason.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And I think that there are people who engage in what they say as collaboration, and yet the well, let's say the empathy step is not quite fulfilled, or follow through from adults is not quite fulfilled, and so then therein lying therein lies more good reason for them not to trust it.
Yes. I mean, and those are the reasons that we like to have a few people in a building who do have some greater knowledge of the model. Because if somebody leaves the first step of the problem solving process prematurely, they don't hear all the kids' concerns.
Mm,
If they don't enter a good concern of their own into consideration, if they agree on a solution in the third step that doesn't address the concerns of both parties, the solution's not going to work. And that can cause people to lose faith in the process.
right.
Hate to see that happen just because people could have used a little bit more training to avoid those pitfalls.
Time seems to be a currency in life, but also in schools. And so the amount of time that somebody gives themselves or carves themselves out to have these conversations, I don't find that to be difficult where we are. People will take time if I ask them to, or if I encourage them to sit down and talk with a student once. So now the issue, of course, is maybe they've either done the empathy step and they really truly understand the student's concerns and like, oh, now I got to get kids from lunch, so I never got to say my concerns or make a plan. I feel sometimes it falls apart without people. I think sometimes us adults need executive functioning skills to be able to say we can do another step later. Um, how have you helped people through that challenge?
Well, boy, where to start? Number one, the school day was structured around academics.
Yeah.
Whoever designed it apparently didn't take into account the fact that a lot of kids were going to struggle with academics and that we were going to need time to solve those problems with them.
Mm,
That's number one. So we are retrofitting here the school schedule, because we didn't allow for time to solve problems with our students, right? So that puts, as things currently exist, because of that scenario, that puts people who work in schools in a scenario where they have to sort of find time wherever they can, right? And even pre-COVID, but certainly post-COVID, finding time wherever you can, especially with staffing shortages, that's not so easy. So I'm much more oriented toward, it's great to find time where you can, but we have to structure problem solving into the day.
yeah.
There's no escaping it. And you're going to get more academics done if you structure problem solving into the day, because you're not going to be dealing with the same problem every day of the school year,
Right.
which is ridiculously time consuming. You're not going to be dealing with the concerning behaviors that are the byproducts of those problems, which can be unsafe, but most assuredly are also extremely time consuming. And if we build those structures, we can set the stage for to be proactive in that problem solving. One of the things I'm talking a lot about these days, and I do have another book coming out in January or February called The Kids Who Aren't Okay.
Mm,
I think the subtitle is The Urgent Case for, let's see if I can remember this, Reimagining Support, Hope, and Belonging in Schools. And it's all about, well, chapter 3 in that book is just this, it's a long chapter, all the things we do in schools that are reactive
Yeah.
and how much capitalism is involved in terms of the product that schools buy and what
Mm.
we teach our educators to do. An enormous amount of money is spent on being reactive. Um,
Right,
people
right. Being late to
being
solve a
late,
problem.
correct. So de-escalating, many people, thanks to some good marketing, many people think de-escalating is crisis prevention. De-escalating is crisis management. So's restraint, so's seclusion, so are blocking pads, so are calming corners, so is giving a kid a break when that's the key word, they are beginning to struggle with a particular task.
Mm.
We even have staff in our schools whose very job title tells us that they are the late staff. The people who we expect to show up on the scene when it's already late. They often have the word crisis in their job title. And we have this piece of equipment that has become ubiquitous, especially in American public schools, that sort of signals that we are already late. It's called the walkie-talkie.
Right.
Boy, are we late. Wouldn't it be nice if we put some thought into thinking about, and that's a big part of what this book is about, what it would look like if we were early. And instead of focusing on behavior, which is late, the kids concerning behavior is just their frustration response, which means they're already frustrated about something. So the concerning behavior is late. The problem that's causing their concerning behavior is early. We can do this. We need a guide to do it. This is not me selling books. This is sort of my passion these days.
Right.
Is I just cannot stand to see kids and educators suffer because of structures that point them toward being late. It would not be that hard to be early if we could start all over again, right? We'd be early. We wouldn't be late, and classroom teachers would have time to solve problems with their students, and those problems would be identified and solved proactively. This is not that hard. The biggest impediment are the structures that are already in place.
Not full agreement. It's already a book that I wish I wrote, which makes it a good book. You've done that a few times. Actually, okay, so I'll tell you that the I don't even know if it was Lost at School, which I know is very popular of your books. Might have been another one. But anyway, I read a book of yours, not knowing who you were, about 5 years into my working with kids. And I just, I thought I was a little bit crazy. Like I'm a radical, weird guy who believes that, whoa, 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 let's all slow down and we could restructure things and do it differently. And so I have to thank you for letting me know I'm not crazy and indeed pointing out in a tight logical argument that we could actually reorient. Um,
What's crazy is how many kids we're losing. How many? I mean, the data tell the tale,
hmm,
right? We have astronomical rates of depression and anxiety and chronic school absenteeism and suicidality and concerning behaviors that are more extreme than ever. The evidence is before us that things are not going well. And it's not that things aren't going well for every kid. It's just that things are not going well for more kids than ever, right? That's telling us something ain't right, right? It's also telling us we can't get away with just continuing to do things the way we always have. And it's also telling us that things are getting worse. Apparently, that means that a lot of the initiatives that have come down the pike in the last 2 to 3 decades didn't get the job done.
right, right. It's like if we're going to do more of what we're already doing. You might ask, well, how are we doing?
Right.
And so, right. I want to ask, well, how do I say it? You were saying that you feel that most kids are, you maybe didn't say this. This is what I think. Most kids are basically okay. And yet, of course, we see that there, for a number of reasons you might guess, um, more than ever, kids are depressed and anxious, signals that they're stressed about something. I like Jonathan Haidt, so forgive me for the tangent. Do you know what I'm talking? The Anxious Generation book that
Yeah.
he wrote, and I'm a big fan of Lenore Skenazy and Peter Gray. I love what they had to say about free play. I'm going to pivot from the unsupervised play part, but I noticed that we tend to cling to whatever the short, easy answer is. Haven't you noticed? And we're about to have a book talk about Jonathan Haidt's book in our school, and I
Mhm.
was excited about that for a day. I was excited because I'm impressed with some of the findings that he has, and I'm impressed with. For me as a reader, I was reading it as the unsupervised play part and kids more autonomy part as the thesis. But rereading it, I'm noticing, and now hearing people talk about it, I noticed that the thesis and what people find interesting is that cell phones are ruining everything. If it weren't for social media and cell phones, then we'd be fine. So let's make some mandate about cell phones. And so I can't help but notice that that sort of follows the typical track of what we do in schools. How do you feel about all of this and the thesis that Haidt puts forward?
I'm trying to decide how blunt to be.
I guess you can decide, but to me, I just don't have to worry.
Well, what social media mostly does is make all things, both good and bad,
Yeah.
more accessible and somewhat more covert. Somewhat more covert because, my parents didn't know that I had the Penthouse magazine under my mattress at the age of 14. So I
Right.
was covert, right? But I think that part doesn't matter that much, the covert part. But what social media mostly does is accelerate things in terms of age at which kids access them.
Mm.
And accessibility is the main thing it does, right? My worry is that if we throw all our eggs in that basket, we will miss most of what's going on. So, just as an example, and because I write about this I'm not pushing the new book, but I'm writing about it right now, right? In chapter 1 of the new book, I talk about all of the things that have made it harder to be a kid in the last 2 decades. Um, we don't want to miss these things because we are distracted by social media. And by the way, I'm not saying social media doesn't have its place, especially for those who are greatly overusing it.
Mm.
People might call that addicted, right? But if we focus mostly on social media, we will miss the impact. I'm not going to name everything I have in chapter 1, but it is very detailed about how it's harder to be a kid now. Number 1 on my list, school shootings. 1999, Columbine High School massacre.
Yeah.
Right. Over 400 of them since. What's the research tell us? The research tells us at least 2/3 of kids are anxious about being shot at school. Can you imagine those words? Can't imagine those words coming out of my mouth when I was a kid.
Same.
Unimaginable,
Same.
right? And a third are extremely anxious about it. And educator, the percentages are about the same. We don't want to, come on. We're going to, taking cell phones away is not going to help us address that, right? Saying, as one of our political leaders did a few months ago, that shootings in schools are just a fact of life. Don't get distracted. High stakes testing. By the way, as Alfie Kohn pointed out to us quite some time ago, high stakes testing was driven by capitalism as well.
Sure was.
Yep.
Is.
Not just the restraint industry, as we call it, It's the high stakes testing industry. Was it good for kids for us to turn their teachers into test prep robots? Instead of meeting kids where they're at, we're telling every kid they got to get over the same bar by the end of the school year, and we're telling their educators that their job performance and job security will be based on how close they came to hitting the mark on that.
Right. That's why people got into teaching. That's,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Zero tolerance. I'm not going to keep going, but zero tolerance policies. This is where this push, by the way, zero tolerance policies became popularized after Columbine and were intended to keep us safer. Didn't work. Made things worse, according to the research. Um, it made us focus on frustration responses
Right.
and coming up with an algorithm of adult imposed consequences for modifying those frustration responses instead of focusing on the problems that are causing those frustration responses. And zero tolerance policies and high stakes testing worked out more poorly for some than others. I could go on being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. Um, if we focus primarily on cell phones and social media, we will miss all that stuff. And I think all that stuff is where most of the action's at.
Sure. I
So,
see cell phones and social media as a, I mean, that's one slice of an enormous pie, and the way that you would it doesn't matter what you if you pay attention to it or not paying attention to it. What you want to be paying attention to, by my way of thinking, is how people are using cell phones. Why are they why is that an attractive thing for them to be doing? Or
right.
social media rather. In my realm as working through addictions with people, most people will say it gives me some sense, illusory as it may be, of gratification to use social media. And the people who are having the toughest problems with it will say, yeah, I mean, and it's in detriment to my hygiene, my sleep hygiene. It's in detriment to my actual social life. This is not really being social. So it's like cold gruel for sure, but at least I have this thing that gives me a quick sense of pleasure. And well, that's a good conversation starter because then you can talk about attractive alternatives. Like what if this is giving you this sense of elation or joy, are there other things that give you this sense of joy and elation? And also, hey, you mentioned that it's net negative consequences in your life. Are you interested in improving those? What do you think it would mean to improve the? That's a conversation that helps things. My worry isn't so much that we're only going to think about cell phones, although of course, that's big. It's just even if we do that, I think we're going to do it wrong.
I think we already are doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You know me, I wouldn't ban cell phones. I would engage kids in a school in collaborating on how to deal with the cell phone issue because I
Mm,
don't think mandates work very well. That's a slightly minor point. The big take home message is I don't want to miss the forest for the trees, right? And
right.
kids not only find joy and happiness in social media, they find belonging,
Hmm.
they find identity. Um, Belonging and identity are good things. Joy and happiness are good things. Big problem is some kids, not most even, but some find identity and belonging in things that are ultimately going to be detrimental.
Right.
All right, there's always been detrimental, right? We've had, there's been hate forever, right? There's been toxicity forever, right? Um, Social media accelerates it and makes it more accessible. I don't think we have the perfect understanding yet of who's most vulnerable to it, but I think it's probably safe to assume that those who are most vulnerable, those most marginalized, are those who are most vulnerable to it, to the worser ingredients of it.
When you say marginalized, just because that's a hot word, what do you mean?
Uh, Very quickly, kids who aren't doing well.
Hmm.
Kids who aren't doing well for one reason or another.
Right, got it.
There's a lot of reasons to not be doing well these days.
If you're not doing well, you may not be finding belonging and purpose and joy and connection where you are in school. That's
Perfectly said.
that's why not get it somewhere else? Yeah.
Perfectly said. Well, you need it somewhere else, right?
Right, right, right. That's a human need. Um, when you talk about solutions being something like, maybe this isn't perfect, but you're you would rather get groups of students to engage in solutions about social media. And I don't mean to harp on social media. We could take any of those points that you
Right.
listed and then ad infinitum, but solutions about things. How far do you like people to go in the collaborative sense? What I mean is, you can get a group of kids together and say that they need to talk. It's almost like the leading the witness question. Why do you think cell phones are definitely bad? And so that they can generate a response of why they think that you want to hear cell phones are definitely bad. Uh,
Well, remember that in the three-step process of collaborative and proactive solutions, you have to start the conversation.
mm,
It could start in any of a variety of ways, but it could sound like this. I've noticed that a lot of kids in our school are distracted by their cell phones these days. What's up?
right. So starting with an adult, uh,
An expectation, right?
right.
You always start with an expectation that's not being met, which we call an unsolved problem,
Yep.
right? It could also sound like this. I've noticed that a lot of kids in our school are having difficulty focusing on academics these days. What's up, right? So the first step, we're finding out what the kids' concerns are. They're telling us what's hard about that, right? I would be astounded if the distraction of cell phones didn't come up in the context of that first step.
Sure.
But remember, then comes the second step, the define it all concern step, which is where we're entering our concern into consideration, right? My concern is that, if people are not able to focus on their academics for whatever reason, it's going to be very hard for them to do well in school. It's going to be very hard for them to go on to the next grade. It's going to be very hard for them to be successful. Then we're coming up with a solution that works for both parties, but it has to address the adult concern as well.
Mm,
Right? Um, you know what? I've been doing that process for 30 years. I have just a ridiculous amount of faith in that process and am extraordinarily skeptical about solutions that are imposed. I
uh,
can't think of any good reason
likewise.
to leave the kids out.
Yeah, likewise. I don't think anything good comes of leaving kids out. All that happens is that we're doing some guesswork.
At
And
best.
right, and of course, kids. I don't need to preach to you why your model is worthwhile to use, I guess.
Yeah, I like my model
But
already.
right, I guess you probably know. The idea of kids having skin in the game in the first place often solves a problem in and of itself.
Ken,
Again, I mean that's not the be all end all, but I have noticed a lot of times that a student who's engaged in a conversation is for the first time realizing, oh, you care?
right.
And that's motivating in and of itself. Not that motivation is the key, the skill is the key,
Good.
but it's worth it. It opens up the conversation.
Totally.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? There's something to be said for being heard. There's something to be said that the kid is sitting there thinking, wait a second, you want to hear what I think is making this hard for me?
right,
And you're actually willing to listen to me,
right.
and you're actually curious, and you're actually not going to lower the boom after I tell you what I tell you. I can do this.
Mm.
I've been waiting to do this for about 10 years.
I have I want to get into the way that we as a school are solving problems more collaboratively. So I'm trying to do a little bit of patchwork with use the good of the mandates that we have, the initiatives that we have placed upon us. I work in the social emotional learning realm. Now, I think a lot of different things about the realm in which I am in, and I am a poster for. We are supposed to do something like PBIS. It's supposed to be like when having expectations and acknowledging when kids are meeting expectations. Uh, we've turned that instead into having expectations and noticing when it's difficult for students to meet expectations. And when we notice that it's difficult for kids to meet expectations, we don't hand out rewards and we don't offer quick consequential action. We actually open up conversations both in classrooms and one-on-one. This is where maybe you could help steer me straight a little bit. So in classrooms, our acknowledgement is of that we have done the effort required to have a conversation about why things are difficult, that the teacher has listened to, and part of our SEL initiative also is doing restorative circles. So we do it that way. It's like, okay, we're sitting in circles anyway. We're having conversations, so we'll talk about what's difficult. And our acknowledgement system is, okay, so we've collaborated on, I teacher can change a few things because now I've heard you. I understand why that's so demanding on you. And you students are will meet this following expectation, this adaptation of our expectation. Um, so that's where we're at right now, and it's just hitting the ground. People are skeptical of collaborating in the first place. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I love collaborating with kids. I like hearing what it is they're telling us is getting in their way.
Right?
But it sounds a little bit like we are only doing the first step of solving problems collaboratively.
How so? Maybe
Well,
I said it bad.
the kid is telling us what's making it hard for them to meet an expectation.
Right.
Um, we are then taking that information and accommodating based on what we heard. We just went off the rails.
Right. No. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I miss telling you a step, but I think that you're gonna say something very worthwhile.
okay, accommodating, modifying, adapting. Those are usually adult driven. Even if you've heard what's getting in the way for a kid, you're heading in the right direction.
Mm,
But generally speaking, accommodate the way it's usually done, adapting, accommodating, modifying are what the adults then come up with because they want to be responsive to what the kid says. So I love listening to kids. I love trying to be responsive. But if the kid is not part of the solution,
right.
we're doing plan A.
All the way down. We've just talked about it and then gone back to plan A, right? If that's
Bingo.
right. No, I missed the step. I should be careful if I'm speaking to you about um, collaboration, but we are not missing the I wonder if step. That is involved. So kids are helping generating solutions
Good.
because both teacher and students have both been able to express what their concerns are. So it's not
That's fabulous.
but you got into the reason I didn't get defensive too much is because I can imagine without some good massaging of this work, it getting into the realm very easily of, okay, I've listened to you and now I'll make this adult accommodation.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. I don't find that most solutions that we come up with through this process, I'd have to think a little more about this. I don't think most of the solutions we come up with are an adaptation, an accommodation, or a modification. I think that's the old being brought into the new, right?
Mm,
Truth is, I wouldn't want people thinking about an adaptation, an accommodation, or a modification when they're trying to think about a solution. All I want them thinking about is how we're going to address the concerns of both parties,
let's solve this. Yeah,
right?
good
There's,
point.
there's, I've seen sort of algorithms. I saw this way back in the day with ADHD when I worked in an ADHD clinic and we were doing ADHD evaluations.
Mm,
Only goal of which was to decide yay or nay on whether a kid met diagnostic criteria for ADHD. right? And if they didn't, of course, we'd say, no, you don't meet criteria for ADHD. And of course, then the parents who knew something was going on with their kid, otherwise they wouldn't have sought out the evaluation. They're being told, no, it's not that, but I can't take any further because that's not what we do here, right? But more to the point,
I see what you're saying. So
if we
if a
get
kid
this,
doesn't meet a diagnosis, then there's no more help
oh,
I can
well,
give you.
right,
Right.
right,
There's the problems don't exist anymore because
correct.
there's not a diagnosis.
Right. What a terrible thing to do to a parent, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
brought my kid here. I paid good money to find out what was going on with my kid, and all y'all do here is decide yay or nay on ADHD. That's bad by itself. But here's the worst part. If the answer was yes, ADHD, we would then go to this boilerplate menu of recommendations,
And is that really help? Right.
pop it into the report, and some of those boilerplate recommendations included things like remove the child from all distractions. I always thought that was a fascinating one because my experience tells me that a kid diagnosed with ADHD can find a distraction in a piece of lint, right?
Right.
So, but the main thing is we had this boilerplate. I don't love, I get why people think it's good. I don't think it's good at all. We're looking for a solution that addresses the concerns of both parties. We are not looking for a boilerplate solution to attach to something. Lots of accommodations, adaptations are boilerplate.
This is the point at which Alfie said something to the effect of, I think you need to get out of public schools because I agree wholeheartedly, and I find myself like if I started the school of Zach Rhodes, there would be no diagnoses. There would be listening, there would be solving problems, and there would be learning and whatever. Not that there would be no problems, but at least we would put an emphasis on solving them for what they were, not trying to categorize them and have a boilerplate solution, as you say. But that is not realistic in a school district. And I know that I, trust me that I know I go to work some days like ready for war and I'll fight it to the end. And, I go some days beaten into submission and say, well, what is the next best thing that we can do? So I'm fighting with this loss that I feel sometimes because often I do feel like I'm doing the best I could do with the system given to me. Um, what is what is your take on that? I mean, people are working in school systems. School systems are what they are. Someone like me is trying to influence more conversation, dialogue with kids, more problems being solved with kids. And I'm not doing it perfectly. I think I know how I would do it better if only I could. I mean, what is your take on that way of thinking about things?
Number one, it's not a public school issue.
Yeah.
It's a training issue.
Mm.
Anybody in a school is trained, whether it's public, private, charter. Um, they're trained, right? If we train people that the holy grail is adaptation, accommodation, modification, that's what they'll shoot for. If we train people instead that what we're looking for is to identify the concerns of both parties and come up with a solution that addresses those concerns, and that a solution often isn't an adaptation, accommodation, or modification. I get what you're saying. This is what we've always done. I don't view this as the impossible dream. This is actually, there's many, in the same way that there are many things ingrained in the day of a public school that are late, that are reactive, right? And we can turn that around, right? We can turn around what's the nature of a good solution. Don't restrict yourself. Don't confine yourself to adaptation, accommodation, modification. There is a universe of solutions that might not fall into one of those buckets, right? I wouldn't even be thinking adaptation, accommodation, modification. I'd be thinking, what solution can we come up with together that addresses the concerns of both parties? In
That
some ways, that's more straightforward.
and that's like bedrock solution focus.
Totally.
I think I can do that. I can do that. Um,
I
but then
know.
then there's the proactive focus, and I think that's where we get caught up. And so eventually we drill down, and a kid would say that part of their perfect solution would be something like not being made to take tests, depending on how old a kid is. I mean, I've had high school students who said, I really, they said in earnest and honestly and thoughtfully, I feel like I'm being made ready for a test to take. I don't feel like that is valuable to
Oh,
me, and
oh.
that's why I mean, so at some level, not everyone's so articulate or even knows exactly why they're feeling, but that's the limitation I mean, that there are of that list among the ecosystem that you just listed that make up the place that school kids are in. That feels like the limitation.
Well, it's an interesting concern. I feel like the only reason you're teaching me this and the only reason you want me to learn it is because I have to pass a test, and that has no meaning for me. First of all, thank you for saying that, kid,
Mm,
right? Next thing I would say is tell me more about that,
right.
right? Because we're not done hearing about that yet, right? One of the questions I'd want to ask is what makes you feel that this is only about the test, right? Um, and boy, that's an interesting conversation for an educator to have with a kid because the educator feels like it's only about the test too. But so we're kind of got common ground here.
Right.
But hearing more about what the kid is saying might give us the opportunity to think about how, even though we are still in many places driven by the test, how do we find meaning
Mm,
in the work that we're doing here at school, right? Oh man, what a great conversation to have with a kid, right? I would have to hear more about what the kid's talking about, right? I would have no problem acknowledging that the kid's got a legitimate concern, right? Does that mean that the solution is not to take a test? No, I don't know if that would be mutually satisfactory. I don't know if that would be realistic. Those are the two criteria. So if that's what the kid proposes first, we have to remind the kid of our concern. Might be something like this. Well, my concern is that while I would love to teach you things that are only riveting and that are only going to be useful to you in the real world and that will never show up on a test, I can't promise that just because of the expectations that are being placed on me as a teacher, right? Um, so there might be some things we cover that do end up on a test, and I can't do anything about that. Now let's put those two together, right? And a lot of it would depend on what the kid said further besides what the first thing the kid said, right? But is there a solution in there somewhere? Heck yeah.
oh, sure.
Is the solution going to be you don't have to take tests? I doubt it. That probably wouldn't be realistic or mutually satisfactory.
Right. And I think that if in that case, I was not the student's teacher. And so this is where now it gets a little messy for me too. I like the way that you clean it up though, every time I bring up a mess. I work in the social emotional learning realm on on the team at an elementary school now. I was at a high school. Um, I have a few things that I'm thinking about that irk me about social emotional learning. One, it is our ask, at least in our district, to be the ones who are late to the party often. It's our ask in the district to be proactive too, so that's good. And then also to be the ones who are late for whatever the problem was. We would get at the outskirts when somebody's already, throwing a chair across the room. So there's something wrong with being supposed to be proactive and then being the very people who are reactive. So something said that, that's a tell that whatever the proactive thing is that is happening is not very effective. So that's something I can probably clean up on our own
Yeah.
by switching the expectations that staff have of us as a social emotional learning team. Another thing that I have thought about that it's another I heard you on I don't know what the talk was. It was a discussion that you were having and you listed some of these points that you mentioned in one of the chapters of your book. And you talked about just what things are changing of late that make that could create problems for students. And I'm really with you, and I don't hear this a lot from people in my department. I think that social emotional learning is wonderful, and I think introspection is good overall. And I do wonder if that, and I'm not going to put I'm not going to put a tag on it whether I think it's bad or good, but I do often wonder about how much we are asking students to do by looking inward. I forget how you put it.
I think you listened to my Freeport speech talk with Nirav Shah.
Yeah, that was it. And I listened to part of it when I was driving home from Canada the other day. But I got that far. And you're the first person who's not, I either hear SEL ruining our schools, making our kids whatever, and so that's not worth listening. That's radical in a way and not worth listening to. Or I hear, don't people get it? Social emotional learning. It's what everybody needs. It's they need to think about themselves and their feelings and their deepest whatevers. And I don't agree with that either.
Right.
Um, where do you think is the middle ground, or do you not have a dog in the fight there?
It's not a major thing to me, but I think that I haven't thought about it that much, but I think you look inward when you can.
Right.
So I don't know how much I was looking inward when I was 6 years old. Um, and I don't know if it would have been beneficial for me to look inward when I was 6 years old, right? I started looking inward when I needed to start looking inward, right? And it wasn't because I was being instructed to look inward. I think you look inward when you're developmentally ready to start looking inward. And I haven't thought about this enough to feel certain about that part. So I don't think it's bad to create programming where kids look inward, but I also think we can't ignore the fact that looking inward has a readiness factor. Um, and if all we're doing is having kids look inward, what do they go to? What do they find? What's there for them if looking inward leads them to something that troubles them,
Hmm.
right? Um, so looking inward in and of itself, not tragic. Readiness factor. Um, I think there is a readiness factor. I think there's a developmental readiness piece to looking inward that, as you can tell, I haven't thought about that much, but probably should.
I think I haven't either, even though I definitely should. I think I haven't because I have, in full transparency, the bias of working in the field. So that just registered to me the other day. It's like a thought that I allowed to escape me because I don't want to think too much about it. And when you had mentioned something fairly recently, I couldn't help but try to follow the thread.
It's an interesting, since that talk, I haven't given it a ton of thought, mostly because I don't have that much time to think. But I want to start giving it thought because I think SEL has the best of intentions,
Right.
and SEL was intended to be a response to the fact that kids were not doing well. Whether SEL is the primary answer to the fact that kids are not doing well, I have my doubts.
Right. 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 Yeah. Right. So that was supposed to be an answer to many of the other points that you mentioned.
Correct.
Things are going on that inevitably are causing difficulty for our students. We better make a department that
That's what we do.
cleans up that mess, and that in itself is like a systemic adaptation. Uh,
And better yet, take that away from the classroom teacher
right.
who knows the kids the best, has most of the opportunity to talk with kids about things that are troubling them. And instead, let's have somebody come in, do a module, and leave.
I couldn't possibly agree with you more. I think that is where I'm trying to strike. I would love to work myself out of a job. I would love for next year administrators to say, "I have no need for you," not on this basis.
Right.
Because that is what we were trying to do. I have another colleague and two school counselors who we're all pretty simpatico, and we all are in line with this. So we are doing the due diligence of being in classrooms and trying to hand off uh, everything to teachers without looking like we're being dismissive of our own jobs. It's like we want to help upskill people. We want to be involved in problem solving, and also we want teachers to get great at being the ones involved in problem solving because they know their students who they're with for 7 hours a day much better than we do,
Right.
who are called to talk to their students only when something difficult happens.
Right. We just have to make sure we're upskilling them with the right thing.
Hmm.
I'm biased. I think I, my right thing is what I think is the right thing because I'm the one who came up with it. Right. I'm open to all other things, but collaborative and proactive solutions has been making some sense to me for 30 years, hasn't stopped yet. Um, doesn't mean I'm closed to other possibilities. I just think that the ultimate litmus test is whether we are focused on problems and not the behaviors being caused by them,
Hmm.
solving them collaboratively and proactively, and all of the unmodular relationship enhancement, communication, and skill enhancement that comes along with that process. Um, that's what I'd be doing for SEL.
Unmodular, as in it's not being, we're not going to teach an SEL lesson and there you go, you're
Correct.
social and emotionally learned. Yeah.
No, classroom teachers have opportunities to solve problems with their kids dozens of times a day,
Yeah.
right? And the truth is, it doesn't have to be dozens of times a day if we're solving them, identifying them, and solving them proactively, but you get the idea, right?
Right.
Who's best positioned to notice, to have that relationship, to build that relationship? That's not somebody who comes in for 45 minutes a week.
Right. Right. Um, so if I am going to reflect what I think you've helped me with here, my biggest concerns, my troubles that I see are that people are over relying on me to do something, or perhaps I'm being too arrogantly imposing in a place where I'm really not needed, except perhaps to be another person in the discourse. Sometimes people they'll get a really good start on problem solving. They'll even begin with the hardest part for teachers sometimes, which is to really listen to and really not interrupt and really actively listen and reflect what's difficult for a student. And yet they will stop there because they're out of time, go on to something else, forget to come back to it, and it's not resolved. So one thing it seems like you're suggesting is, well, the answer is a little bit simple. It's almost like, do you want to lose weight? You should stop eating so much. It's like, do you want to solve this problem? Well, then do all of the steps of solving the problem,
Right.
right? The that's something I'm running into too, is that there is a structure of the day, and I'm hoping to influence the structure of the day to be a little bit different and more sympathetic to needing to solve problems. Until then, do you have a best advice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Start with the 5, 10, 15 kids in the building who are struggling the most.
Mm,
Start using the assessment of skills and unsolved problems to identify their skills and unsolved problems. Number one, that is a giant leap in the right direction of having people get the right lenses on skills, not motivation, but your school may be there already. You know better than me. It's a giant leap forward in helping people focus on unsolved problems rather than the behaviors that are being caused by those unsolved problems. It is a giant step forward in helping people prioritize because they're not going to be able to fix everything at once, solve every problem at once. I don't like the word fix. Um, it's a giant step in the direction of getting out in front of it and being proactive, right? Because the truth is, you can't fix everything in one fell swoop, not with a kid and not with a building. right? But the ASIP is a very good way to get those conversations going about the need to be proactive, about what we're focused on, about, quite frankly, whether our checking in and checking out, if you're still doing that, or whether our teaching and reteaching replacement behaviors, or whether our social emotional learning modules are going to solve any of the problems we've identified with these kids,
Mm.
right? We've got to get the conversation going. Slowly but surely, people start talking about, oh, the behavior's late. Why are we focused on the behavior in this building, right? Why are we not focused on the problems that are causing that? Just when we focus on behavior, it makes us late, right? Disciplinary referrals are late, detentions are late, suspensions, expulsions, restraints, seclusions. We're late a lot, right? This isn't working for us, the adults. It's not working for the kids. We're doing it to the same kids over and over again, so it's clearly not working. If it was working, we wouldn't keep doing it to the same kid, right? Got to get the conversation going. And I find that the assessment of skills and unsolved problems applied to the kids who are struggling the most, combined with some decent coaching on problem solving, so people have something to show for their problem solving, then discussions start to occur like, well, we came up with a solution, but it didn't work. All right, tell
Mm.
me what you heard from the kid. Tell me what your concern was. Tell me what the solution was, right? So you hear the kid's concern. Okay, I got that. You hear the adult's concern. Okay, I got that. What was the solution? We decided that we were going to cut the number of double-digit division problems they had to complete on the worksheet to 10 instead of 20. And then you can sit there and that's an accommodation, right? Then you can sit there and say, wait a minute, wasn't it the kid's concern that they didn't understand the directions?
Right, right.
How? Yeah, but we needed to come up with an accommodation. No, 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 no. A solution is not necessary. Most solutions are not going to be an accommodation, adaptation, or modification, right? If the kid doesn't understand the direction, and I guess you could call this an accommodation. I wouldn't. I'd call it a solution. Uh, the kid isn't understanding directions. How are y'all gonna address that? Well, I guess we didn't address that. All right, let's go back and do it, man, because that solution's not going to fly.
Mm.
Cutting it in half isn't going to help the kid understand the directions any further. That's the point, right? Oh, we're going to make it more interesting. I'm gonna have it be about sports because the kid's into sports. I divined this, right? Uh, how is that going to help the kid understand the directions better? That's the key.
Yep, good, great. That's wonderful. Thank you. Um, I have one more thing to ask you that's just totally, it's my own thinking, philosophy, and wondering. So it's selfish. I just had a conversation with Lenore Skenazy and her bent on autonomy and freedom, more freedom for children, and that an ecosystem that allows for autonomy and kids to solve problems among each other because of what it's generated through free play and we stop helicopter parenting or teaching or whatever, that would be better and that would solve a lot of problems. I could see in that line of logic where you might be skeptical of something. I love the idea of free play, but I'm thinking about your line of logic in what a solution means, and that everybody's been able to give input on what a problem is, and that free play is sort of, it's a way of being, it's a thing to do, it's an initiative, and it's maybe an accommodation the way people are talking about it. Um, what's your bent on all of that?
I think free play is great. Not a big fan of helicopter parenting.
Sure.
I think there are parents who are over involved. Um, but if you said to me, is free play going to address the vast majority of things we've been talking about so far?
Right, right.
My answer would be no, right? In the same way that I don't think removing cell phones from schools, and I don't think cell phones in schools are good, The way we did it, I have my doubts, right? But I don't think having cell phones in schools is good. I just think it causes us to miss the forest for the trees.
Right.
I think of free play as a tree. I think of cell phones as a tree. Forest is the ecosystem, and it addresses a piece of the ecosystem, which is that parents have been over involved, right? Um, I don't think that's the biggest part of the ecosystem that's failing kids. I think it's in the mix. I just don't think it's a very big part of the mix. That's it.
Things happen, things change. Some of the things that change that perhaps were inevitable or beyond someone's control are going to keep happening and going to keep evolving. Therefore, there will always be problems and demand on all of us. And the thing that seems you focus on absolutely is how we address those things with one another. Uh,
Bingo.
okay, all problems solved.
No, we're not there yet. And won't be there before I leave this planet. But we got to start moving there because we can't keep doing the things the way we've been doing them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been enlivening
My
for me.
pleasure. Yeah.
And anything that I left out that you would like to talk about, and or especially if it pertains to the forthcoming book.
Hmm.
I'm here for it, so you don't have to.
In the forthcoming book, I talk about some other structures that are in place. I'm not a big tier guy, mostly because I think people talk too much about tiers.
TIER.
TIERS of the multi-tiered systems of support, PBIS
Right.
kind. Um, I wouldn't mind tiers as an organizational structure, but not if that's what people are mostly going to talk about, right? And if the goal of tiers was to have supports in place that obviated the need in the case of some kids of special ed, well, then it's failed. We've got this long line pre-tier two telling us that apparently what we've set up in tier one isn't getting the job done because there's a long wait at tier two, right? So I'm not a big tier guy. But this also causes us to enter into the discussion of services. And in the book, I talk about the pool of services, with the analogy being a swimming pool. And in the middle of the swimming pool is a divider separating, we might call it the shallow end, just because there's a shallow and a deep end in a pool, MTSS supports, and the deep end, special ed supports, right? Now, you and I both know that there are kids who don't have IEPs who are accessing special ed supports. And we know that there are kids with IEPs who are accessing MTSS supports. The amount of effort that goes into maintaining that divider, the amount of paperwork, the amount of time. When it turns out, I find this fascinating, that in the case of the kids who I work with, this is not all kids, but this is probably most, accessing the deep end and meeting the requirement, one of the 13 disability requirements, is almost a given. Because of three of the disability requirements, autism, other
Mm.
health impaired, emotional disability, right? They're all in the deep end, right? But the amount of time and money, and I realize that this is complicated, and I don't want to oversimplify it with a pool and an artificial divider, but it sure does feel to me that, and by the way, I'd rather us think about all that other stuff, right? But when it comes to how we're going to support the kids who aren't doing well, we've made the whole process of figuring out what supports they're going to get ridiculously onerous.
Yeah.
And I think that requires thought as well, right? Would I put that first? No, I would put the ASIP first, right? And here's what's interesting. The ASIP is a step in the right direction because it doesn't diagnose the kid. It isn't about the kid's concerning behavior,
Right.
about skills and unsolved problems, right? But when we're done with the ASIP, we know we have problems to solve. But if we also find that the kid needs something more than what tier one can offer, what we go through to make sure the kid gets it is insanity.
Would you say the effort spent making sure the kid gets tier two could have been equally spent or lessened if we just tried to solve the problems in tier one?
Thank you.
It's a shibboleth that culturally, and I find it the same, and you're not going to get an argument from me. And
No,
the addiction realm, uh, specifically that it's a disease that people have and will have forever and can't kick for some reason, something that lives inside of them. We go through monumental effort keeping that up. And I'm not even like sure there are industries that benefit off of things like that. Absolutely. But there's a cultural self-fulfilling drive that just also happens. So my curiosity, maybe it'll be a book someday, if I could be smart enough to think about it this way, is what keeps mythology that we must do these backwards things propelling. I feel like if I could solve that, then I'm pretty few steps ahead.
the mythology is it's the way we've always done it. Well, special ed is not the way we've always done it. It was actually a big deal, and it was a good big deal. It's just that, like a lot of things, we turned it into something that made it more onerous and less helpful than it needed to be. I think we need to rethink it. And I'm not saying I have this grand idea, um, but I know that there are special ed kids who get MTSS supports and kids who don't have IEPs who get MTS, who you get the idea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The reverse. Kids who have IEPs who get MTSS supports. People are fudging it already. Let's make it less difficult, right? Why does school got to be, why do all these structures we have in place got to be so onerous? I don't think they have to be.
Well, so have you made any headway? You get out there. Have you made any headway
A little bit.
solving some of these problems or working to solve some of these problems with people?
That last one's a tough one because people take eligibility very seriously,
Yeah.
as they should. It's their job.
Hmm.
Um, and there are protections in place that we'd have to be careful about. Um, when I have the what I would consider to be an ideal model going in a school, I'll let you know.
Thank you. And thank you again for the conversation. I appreciate you taking time to do
My
this.
pleasure.
I'm looking
And
forward to the new book.
thanks. If this comes out in whatever form this comes out, send it to me so other people can listen to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I'll send you the audio of this and so that you could put it up anywhere you want,
Super.
however you want. Cool.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Take care.